Mr.G, 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 meet your Adams, meet your on Mr.G, 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 meet your Adams, meet your on I'm a writer, got no education. I spent a while screaming for the Hawaiian vacation. On one white lead work coverage a steamer until he covered them with coffee and creamer. Mr. J, Mr. J, Mr. J, Mr. J, teacher Adams, teacher Don Adams. Mr. J, Mr. J, Mr. J, teacher Adams, teacher Don.
Aloha, welcome to the episode. Welcome to the Mr. G podcast, episode 2, numero dos. You don't got to tell me it sounds great. I know it sounds great because I sound great and I'm using a decent microphone. Not the best microphone, but one that I would recommend, the Logitech microphone. Now, yesterday was episode 1, and I interviewed my lovely girlfriend, Jim. And today she's in Manchester, England. And today, however, I'm just gonna go solo. I could interview somebody else, have somebody on the other end, but I'm just, mainly doing this for tech reasons. Every day there's gonna be a bit of improvement, and as you can see, there's already much improvement from yesterday. The only person you should be competing with is yourself, and you shouldn't worry about what other people are doing. I need to take that advice as well. And this is as quiet as it's been in my apartment. I'm just going to be doing this for for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, of course, it's my automatic cat feeder. Over the extent, like I said, we're going to be adding on. So I want to get to the point where I do an hour-long live podcast. But to get to that point, you have to learn, you have to make mistakes, and you have to be willing to make mistakes. Cooking is a great example. I don't follow recipes when I cook. So if I'm trying to cook a certain type of cookie, like the other day I was trying to cook some Nutella cookies, and the first few batches I had to figure out the amount of ingredients to use, how much flour to use compared to how much sugar, and how much baking soda and everything, and how long I chill the dough. And you take in all these factors, and you do this when you're cooking as well. The same day that I baked the cookies, the day before yesterday, I also made an awesome ground beef, onions, green chilies, tomatoes, basil, oregano, and tomatoes. And I had to learn that process. I had to learn that the best way for that type of meat is to cook it with the onions and drain all the grease, all the juice out of it. And when you're putting in the canned tomatoes, you want to make sure to drain all the tomato juice out. And how did I learn that? Did somebody tell me that? No. I made the same thing, except I poured the whole can in with all the juice. And I'm eating it. Oh, it's pretty good, but don't eat all this tomato juice. So, or with green chilies. Writing a book is another great example. When I wrote my first book, it was the original first draft, you could call it, was 600, 700 pages. I had to write it, then read it and edit it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. I had to read it over and over again and edit it over and over again. I had to fail to succeed. So in the original copy of my first book, very few of that actually made it to the store shelves, to the actual book. Most of it was left on the cutting room floor. And they say that's true when you're making movies, when you're writing a book, or just about anything in life. To learn a new skill, you have to fail to succeed. Let's try music. You have to know what song chords work together. And how do you do that? Well, you listen to the chords that don't work together. So on a guitar, if you're going through D, C, A. Those are three chords that work really well together, and you know how they sound. But maybe you do a D, C, F, and then the F is like, and you're like, oh no, that doesn't work or something. But you have to fail to succeed. So what I'm doing with these podcasts is on episode 2 here, the improvements. I have coffee today. I'm not wearing some huge bulky headsets. I have a decent background. I'm using Zoom because apparently you can actually record on Zoom. You can record your podcast. This isn't live or being broadcast for anyone, except for the people outside, because it is really quiet in here. I do have all my windows shut. I have the fans off. So it's really quiet in here, and it's early in the morning. We have the sun shining in. It's nice. So enough about me. No. Don't really have a topic today. I was thinking, oh, I can talk about music. I could talk about politics. I could talk about sports. Sports is a non-polarizing topic for episode 2 here. My favorite team, the San Antonio Spurs, drafted what ESPN called the best prospect ever in team sports, and that's a basketball player from France named Victor Wembanyama. I think I pronounced that correctly. So I grew up in South Texas, and my favorite team growing up was the NBA basketball team, the San Antonio Spurs. I didn't really have any other team. I went to the University of Texas, so I cheer for the Longhorns. But the Spurs have always been my team. And as a sports fan, San Antonio is the smallest market in the NBA, and it's one of the largest Christian markets in the NBA. San Antonio is the only professional sports team in South Texas. And I grew up in South Texas. I sold the San Antonio Express News, which has been a sponsor for the San Antonio Spurs for 20 years. And I grew up watching the Spurs in 1989, or even before that. But when we moved to San Antonio city limits, was 1989, and the San Antonio Spurs, just like they did yesterday, won the NBA draft lottery, which a lot of people say is rigged, which I could totally understand if it is. I don't know if it is or if it isn't, but apparently they have all those lottery balls, and they take the worst teams in the league, the teams that didn't make the playoffs, and the team with the worst record has the best chance of landing the number 1 pick, because the number 1 pick of all the players coming out of Europe or out of college or even out straight from high school is going to be the best player. Then they draw to who gets the number 2 pick and who gets the number 3 pick, etc. And some draft lotteries are more important than others because some draft lotteries are stacked, as they say, loaded with great basketball players. Or there's a superstar player that's just a franchise-changing player. So in 1989, the San Antonio Spurs won the NBA draft lottery, and they drafted David Robinson, the 7-foot-tall admiral, a former Navy. He was enlisted in the Navy, and so they actually drafted him before that in like 87, but he had to complete his 2 years in the Navy. So his rookie year is 1989, and at the time, the Spurs had the biggest turnaround in NBA history. So they went from one of the worst teams in the league to one of the best teams. Since then, that record has been broken. But David Robinson, a great person, a great Christian, a great dude for the community, built literal schools around San Antonio, started the David Robinson Foundation, did great things. And San Antonio's kind of a small market. It's the smallest market in the NBA, but the H-E-B, the local grocery store, always was a sponsor of the Spurs, and I imagine they still are. And they would always have like little free events for kids to go to, and where the San Antonio Spurs players would go and sign autographs. And a lot of times you wouldn't get like the top players, you'd get bench warmers and stuff. But sometimes some of the top players would go. And me and my brother, we didn't have any money or parents or toys or anything. And so basketball was our thing, and they had these free events. And we would make our way to these events. Our mom, who didn't have custody of us, if she was visiting that weekend, she would take us. But we got to meet a lot of the players, and I still remember a lot of them today. One player, Antoine Carr, actually gave me and my brother a ride to the store. We must have been 7 years old, and we were sitting at a bus stop, and we just started asking people for rides to the store. We didn't have parents or anything when we didn't know how to take the bus, and it was on a Sunday. And the first car that pulls up is a brand new like white truck We're like, can you give us a ride to the store? He's like, I'm going to Albertsons was the store. I'm going to Albertsons. This was on the intersection of Thousand Oaks and Henderson Pass, if you want to look it up. And so I get into the cab with Antoine Carr, who's a professional basketball player, but he had since been traded to the Utah Jazz at that time, but he was still in San Antonio because it was the summer, I guess. And my brother gets in the bed of the truck, and we're riding. He gives us a ride to the store, and I'm like, "You're Antoine Carr, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm Antoine Carr." I bet you he remembers this too. He has to remember to giving two young boys a ride to the store, but that wouldn't happen in today's world, I don't think. That was generations ago. I'm the last part of Gen X, so the millennials have already come and gone. They're out of here, and then Gen Z's wrapping up. So now we got Gen Alpha coming. Oh no, yeah, those guys won't have an ego. Gen Alpha, what a name, huh? I'm Gen Alpha. Fuck you, kid. Those youngsters are gonna be so much younger than me. It's unbelievable. Get off my yard. But I'll finish this up. This, like I said, it's just me quick. I'm going to talk about the other number one draft picks of my favorite team, the San Antonio Spurs. So Antoine Carr gave us a ride to the store, and he actually lived near Sean Elliott at 281, where that Albertsons was, Thousand Oaks and 281. I imagine they must have lived in Hollywood Park because Sean Elliott, the broadcaster, actually opened a pet store. I think he loves animals, and me and Michael, my twin brother, we would walk there to the pet store. We probably met Sean Elliott more than any other NBA basketball player. And Sean Elliott actually did make an all-star team, his former all-star, well-known broadcaster. And he was one of the coolest dudes. I had like 20 Sean Elliott autographs, or more than that. I think we had more Sean Elliott autographs than any other person. But so during that time, their star players were David Robinson, Antoine Carr, and Sean Elliott. And the Spurs have been the most successful team in franchise sports in all of major American sports, football, baseball, basketball, even better than the Yankees. They have had the highest winning percentage over the last 30 years, probably since 1989. Because David Robinson stayed with the Spurs for almost 20 seasons. And I don't know off the top of my head, probably 18, 19 seasons. And they made the playoffs just about every year. One particular season, though, David Robinson was injured for the whole season. So they actually finished with the worst record. And like I said, the draft lottery, they'll sometimes have a star player. So some NBA draft lotteries are more important than others. The David Robinson draft lottery was a big one. You look at a player like Shaquille O'Neal, whoever won the number one pick on that would get Shaq. A lot of times who the best player is going to be. So this particular year, Tim Duncan, probably the best power forward ever to play in basketball, was going to be the top prospect. And the Spurs finished with one of the worst records in the league, but they still only had a small percent chance of winning the ball because the number one pick, because a lot of other players also finished with really bad records. A lot of other teams finished with bad records. So they finished off that year one of the worst teams. Dominique Wilkins, former Atlanta Hawk player, was in one of his last years, and for some reason he played with the Spurs for 1 year. That year that they were horrible. I got Dominique Wilkins autograph too. But they ended up winning the draft lottery, and then they drafted Tim Duncan. So then they had David Robinson and Tim Duncan. And before Tim Duncan, the Spurs were one of the top teams, but they had never won a championship. And if you were to say San Antonio Spurs winning a championship, no way. Because in basketball, the same teams win the championships: the Celtics, the Lakers, recently the Heat, the Spurs, the Pistons. It's always the same teams. You look at the 4 teams left this year: the Lakers, the Celtics, the Heat. The Denver Nuggets are the only team that has never won a championship out of the teams currently that are in the playoffs right now. So David Robinson, Tim Duncan put together, they were the Twin Towers. And within 2 years, 1999, they drafted Tim Duncan in 1997. Within 2 years, in 1999, they won the NBA championship, the first ever NBA championship. And it was a great moment for a Spurs fan, having watched the Spurs for 10 years. And Duncan was just in his 4th season. So Duncan would go on to play another 20 years, and they would also be one of the top teams in the league. She's spraying aerosol outside, that lady. That's what you guys are hearing. It was so quiet, and then she realized I was doing a podcast, that this psycho lady that sings in my doorway, And so now she's come outside. But let's just ignore talking about the Spurs. I'm winning. This is being broadcast. Like you can hear that. So like I'm winning totally. They're not. All right. So they drafted Tim Duncan in 1997, and within 2 years they won the championship in 1999. Tim Duncan, David Robinson played together for the next 15 years, and or the next 10 years at least, and they won the championship again 2 years later in 2001. Or no, they won it in 99, then they won it 4 years later in 2003. They won it in 99, then the Lakers had their three-peat in 2000, 2001, 2002. The Lakers and Kobe Bryant beat the Spurs every year. They had some great battles that I saw in person sometimes. I saw Kobe Bryant play one of the best games in the Alamo Dome. So the Lakers three-peat, but then in 2003, the Spurs win their second championship. Then 2 years later, in 2005, they get Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. They win another championship. Then they don't win again until they don't go to the NBA Finals again until 2013, where they play LeBron James and the Heat, and Ray Allen hits an incredible shot, and the Heat end up winning the series. But then the Spurs come back in 2014 and have the most successful playoff run ever, and they don't even have a superstar. It's all teamwork, because the Spurs organization, they're known as being a first-class organization in sports. They're the most successful franchise sports team in all of sports, the highest winning percentage of the last 25 years. But they're also known as a first-class organization where they don't have players that have problems with the law or domestic abuse or anything like that. And San Antonio is a really conservative community. So the San Antonio Spurs and the community of San Antonio fit together great. So like I said, the Spurs have had the largest winning percentage in sports. They drafted these two awesome number one picks that ended up to be NBA legends. First, David Robinson in 89, and then Tim Duncan in 1997. This year's draft lottery was one of the most hyped draft lotteries since LeBron James 20 years ago. So there hasn't been a player that's been this hyped as Victor Wembanyama for 20 years. I don't think I pronounced it correctly there, but Victor, we'll call him, is a 7'3" or 7'4" player, very skinny like a pole, but can hit fadeaway three-pointers, can drive, has great handles. Is probably some people can put his hands on top of the backboard. Very coordinated, very skillful, very agile. Like I said, ESPN said he was the most exciting prospect ever to come into pro sports, into team sports, is what they said. So the lottery was really hyped. I haven't watched it or anything this year, but for years I haven't watched the lottery, but I've watched it every year that they draft, that there was a huge player and the San Antonio Spurs had a shot of getting it. And every year that I've watched, they got the number one pick. I remember when they got the number one pick in 1989 when I was just a little kid, little boy. And I remember in 1997 when I was a teenager selling newspaper subscriptions, and the Spurs had their horrible season. I said, hey, it's okay, they'll suck this year. Every dark cloud is a silver lining. That means next year they could get Tim Duncan out of Wake Forest. And everybody was like, yeah, right, they don't have a shot. There's a bunch of bad teams, they'll get them. And then I just I really believed it. And then yesterday when I'm watching the draft lottery, and I'm just thinking about it, and I really believe that even though the Spurs had a 14% chance of winning, I was 100% sure that they were going to win it, the draft lottery, and they did. And it was really incredible. I don't think I made it happen, but like I said, I wouldn't have watched the draft lottery if it was just a regular draft and they were just having some decent players. But this is a franchise changing players. So the San Antonio Spurs have the best winning percentage in all of sports for the last 25 years. And now they're drafting a 19-year-old that's supposed to be the best basketball player that's since LeBron James. So I would estimate the Spurs are also going to be one of the top teams in sports for the next 20 years. They always seem to pick the perfect season to tank. So they get they have one bad season, so they get a great player that gives them 20 good seasons. So I'm really happy about that. And I've been watching basketball again. I know a lot of my viewers are into cats or anything, but I'm doing this for me. And if you like basketball and you heard my unscripted spiel off the top of my head there, come back for more. And I'll be doing this every day. This is episode number 2. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm happy that we didn't get so many distractions. Other days we will, but thank you very much, and everybody have a great day. From me and my kitties in Honolulu, Hawaii, aloha. G out.